I want to thank you, first of all, for making the journey to Ávila, which, as you're going to discover, is one of the most magnificent places to be. It's an absolute pleasure to do a workshop on Teresa of Ávila and John of the Cross in the place where they actually lived. And I think for me personally, it's such a rare experience to everything about, first of all, my experience with Teresa of Ávila is rare. I'll probably never have such an experience again. But to actually be able to come here and to do a workshop based on her work at this time in history, which is how I'm going to begin by positioning the significance of studying mysticism, the mystical path of Teresa, along with my dear colleague, Jim Finley, who is going to present the work of John of the Cross. So first, let me say that Jim Finley, a doctor of psychology, a mystic, I said to Jim over lunch today that I have never taught with a finer scholar. He is a former Trappist monk from the monastery in the United States, Gethsemane. His spiritual director was Thomas Merton. And he now is, in my opinion, as fine a spiritual director as Merton. So we can set Merton aside in some regards and just look to him as being fine wine when it comes to spiritual direction. And it is such a privilege to reach a state in your life where you no longer feel like you're working towards something, but rather you've reached a stage where you're cooked, where now you feel like you can offer expertise earned through your inner experiences as well as your academic. And that's a nice place to be. And I think you have to reach a certain age in your life, and you have to have a certain amount of inner experiences that are both dark and light, of the night and of the day. And the dark night is certainly a deep part of that, and as is the ecstasy of the mystic. And so I feel like it takes a while before you can teach this. I don't think you can teach this as a young person. I just don't. So there comes a time in your life when you feel, now I can. And so now I can. But as well as saying to you, now I can, I also think there is a great significance as to why now learning the path of Teresa of Ávila and John of the Cross is so significant. Jim's expertise is both on John as well as Teresa. Mine is on Teresa, both from an intimate way of having been lassoed by her in some regard, but also as somebody who simply then fell in love with her and became a scholar on her work. I feel that first it's important to understand what's happening in the world, just a little bit, so that you have a sense of why being called to a path of mysticism, being called to a path of contemporary mysticism, is so significant. Because I think you need to measure the value of the choices you make now against a much grander tapestry. In other words, this isn't just a workshop. Truly, it is not just a workshop. It's a workshop that is taking you deeply into your soul. And so from that point of view, I don't think we can call it a workshop. I think we need to set that word aside. And in fact, we need to find a different word for what it is that you are entering into. And so shall we say that we are entering into the metaphor of the castle? That in fact, at some point, when you go deeply into understanding what it is that the castle is, the metaphor of the soul, what it is to pursue illumination, what it is to respond to, am I being called? Even if that isn't what you said when you signed up, some part of you at some level was responding to that. So I'm going to put that on pause for a minute and then speak to you about the larger atmosphere of this moment in time. Because we are living at a time like none other, that has elements of mysticism from a profound perspective. What is a mystical experience? What is a mystic? There are probably many, many ways that I can answer that. And maybe during the course of our time together, I will. For now, one way that I can answer that is a mystical experience takes you from one dimension of time and space into no time and space. And the catalyst for that is God. The catalyst is God. So that you go from one experience of existence into a completely cosmic experience where your five senses are no longer sufficient through which to measure your sense of existence and identity. Those become insufficient. You become multi-sensory, but not externally, internally. And the transporter of this transformation is the sacred. Your sense of reason, your sense of intellect, that is the vessel through which you always articulate your experiences, ceases to be able to contain these experiences for you. So if someone said, "What did you experience?" there are no words that are sufficient to contain that experience, which is why a mystic shifts to, "Well, it was like." Well, it was like. Or they write poetry. Or they use a metaphor. The soul is like a castle. The soul is like a diamond, said Teresa, with 7 mansions. It's like a diamond. It becomes language of metaphor and experiential because the literal no longer works. So the mystical experience transports you from the literal world to a world that is past, beyond your sense of reason, and the transportation is the essence of God, where you go from thought of God to the actual experience of the nature of God, where you are brought to awe, and a sense of awe, and a sense of, oh my God, you're real. Oh my God, you are real. You actually exist. I've only talked about you. I've read about you. I'd hoped you were real. And now you're saturated in the sense of awe, saturated in a sense of cosmic power and light. And then you return to this little shell called your body. back to your ordinary life, but nothing's ordinary anymore. That's the mystical experience. Up until now meaning the last 20, 30, 40 years, the mystical experience has been associated more with people who've gone off to monasteries or into mountains or into ashrams or into places of isolation to keep their own company. As if mystics were peculiar people. But the experience is so profound that it's not that they're peculiar people. It's that the experience is so powerful that there is a need to protect yourself. That's number one. But number two, you know, there's actually an archetype called the berserker, to go berserk. To go berserk. And the archetype comes from the Eastern Orthodox tradition, that someone who's been so exposed to this profoundness that they have to remove themselves, and yet still people find you because your light is so great. Your light is so great. They'll find you. They find you in the forest. They find you in the cave. There's no place you can go where they won't find you. Even if you're a cave dweller, they know there's someone in that cave. You cannot hide once you become a container for that light. You simply can't. That's another characteristic of the great mystic. And so one of the things that's true is that the people who are called to be containers for this light are not the people who are peculiar and hermits by nature. They're rebels by nature. They're people who've got a stubborn streak in them, who fight and always say, oh, don't pick me, don't go, don't even consider it. So that if they are chosen, they go kicking and screaming, but they do go. Because they lose their appetite. Heaven plays dirty. You lose your appetite for your ordinary life, and it is with a great shattering of your heart that you say, all right, I'll do this. But it's a shattering. What's happening in our world now is that, you know, in a mystical experience, you lose a sense of time. You go from time to timeless. You can be in a mystical experience and it'll feel like, how long were you there? I don't know. And it could have been a microsecond, but you will say, was it a year or a second or a moment? You have no sense. In my experience with healing, can someone heal in a year, in a second, in a week, in a month? What puts time into your life? Where does the factor of time come in? How long do you need for any one experience to last? That is a phenomenal question to dwell on. How long do you want this experience to be? How long do you want this illness to be? How long do you want this suffering to be? Is the length of something and the intensity of something in your hands? Now that is a phenomenon. How fast and how long do you want to experience this? Okay? Now let me ask you the exact same question in a different way. It's the exact same question. How fast do you want to understand the truth of what's going on? That's the exact same question. The exact same question. There's no difference in the question that I just asked you. None whatsoever. To the extent that you want the depth of the truth is the extent to which you engage the speed at which the experience will last. I just asked you the same question, 2 different ways. Now, if you're able to perceive that that's the exact same question, you can see that the relationship to truth and your speed at being able to perceive a relationship to truth has an exact bearing on how fast you maneuver the speed of an experience. I just gave you an extraordinary jewel in the world of mystical law. Mystical law. An experience of mysticism is a revelation of how time and space, speed and depth is contained within our experience of truth, and how fast we can contain truth. Now I'm going to give you a small example of that. Because everything in life revolves, every single thing revolves around exactly what I just said. There isn't one thing, not one of your experiences, that can't be siphoned into what I just told you. You say to somebody, you walk home, you walk in your house, you have someone you care deeply about, or you go into work. It's a child, a husband, a wife, a sister, whatever. It's someone you care deeply about. You know them through your 5 senses, but you also know them through your intuitive sense. 2 different sensory systems. One has a sense of time. The way you see them age, but it takes months to notice a change. You know them intuitively, so you sense a change by the second. By the second. You'll notice that if you mention a different subject, the mood changes that fast. You can't see the mood change that fast, but you can feel it all around. And you'll say, did you feel the temperature in the room just change? You know exactly what I'm talking about. So you walk in the room one day and you say, what's the matter? What's the matter with my son? What's the matter with my daughter? And you instantly get the hit. They're on drugs. It's instant. It's that fast. Except you don't want to know it that fast. That's too fast. You don't want to know it that fast. Far too fast. Because if you did register it that fast, you would have to act on it that fast. The truth would have to incarnate into you taking action that fast. And you would have to go up to your son, daughter, husband, wife, whatever, and say, as a result of you taking drugs, get in that car, we're going straight to the detox center. As the result of you being an alcoholic, you're going, get in that car, quit your job, right to the detox center. I'll take care of the paperwork. I'm going to get you fired. You're leaving your job, and I will take care of the rest. I'll go out and get a job and support the family because you're an alcoholic, you're taking heroin, you're doing this, you're a coke addict. I have to get a job now, I have to support the children, da-da-da-da-da-da. It goes this fast. But you'll be out in 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, and then we'll deal with this, and then we'll deal with that. But you don't want it that fast. The truth hit you too fast. Instead, you need to build time into it. So now you have to put in something that's not true. Must be too much pressure at work. Must be too much pressure at school. There's no truth to that at all. And now you actually know you're lying to yourself. But what you're doing is you're packing the truth with denial, and you're conscious you're doing it. But what you're actually doing is you're putting time into timelessness. And you're saying, I need to stretch that over a period of how much time do I want? I'll take 4 years. I want that truth to incarnate, but I need for it to incarnate over 4 years. So you choose by the speed of denial, to have that incarnate over a period of 4 years. Now, this is really important. Because what you've just said is, I can't perceive truth. I don't want it that fast. Slow light into matter for me. Slow light into matter. I don't want to see it. It's too bright. It's too bright. The mystical experience is the experience of direct light. It's a direct hit of direct light without any matter built into it. It's direct truth without any matter built into it. You don't have the opportunity of building any matter into it. God said, you, and you have a direct hit. And the direct hit may be, I'm going to show you what the cosmos really is like. And in one instantaneous second, all your myths about what you think God is like are taken away from you. There is no Christmas up there. There aren't any temples and there aren't any ashrams. This is all childhood fairy bedtime stories. There's only light, and there's 200 billion galaxies, and there's 200 billion of that, and those are just the silly little stories on planet Earth. And now you're sent back to planet Earth among Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims and all of this, and you have to tolerate the stories. And now you're bursting with the truth that these are stories, but more than stories, we're killing for them. And now you know what a mystic means when they say, oh my God, the pain of this is killing me. This is the pain of truth. Now, healing has a direct bearing on how much truth you can take at what speed. How fast do you want to heal? Let's go with Teresa and the time. What's happening on our planet now is the relationship we as a collective have with time and space and speed is now changing in the exact way with the collective that it once changed with mystics that were singled out, like Teresa. Now it's changing for the entire collective. How do we know that? The experience of how we engage with each other in information has become more rapid. Now, information flies around this planet in an instant, rapidly. It goes from one place to another at the speed of light, called the internet, called technology. And the technology system is very much a crude representation of how our psyche and energetic system work. Just like that. So now, our energetic system works literally at the speed of light. Just at the speed of light. Do you want to close that window for me? Because the sound's going to pick up on this. Are you sure?
Yeah,
okay, all right, it's okay. It's literally that fast. Number two is, every single type of change is universal. Whereas before, when you were growing up, and even as recently as 10, 15 years ago, you were able to block out changes that, if something happened in Korea, something happened in Iraq, something happened here or there, it actually didn't matter to you. Now, every single change either affects your bank, or it affects what you eat, or it affects your future, or your present, or whether or not a weapon of mass destruction is going to kill you. There isn't anything that doesn't affect your everything. And number three, that makes every single decision everybody makes profound. What is a small decision? What? What qualifies as a small decision? What? There's no such thing. Now, shift it to you as an individual. What equals a small decision when it comes to the significance of your health or your life? Do you know? Do you know? What equals a small decision when it comes to you typing something in an email, or you making a decision in terms of, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Especially if you've become non-reflective, which is a fundamentally spiritual discipline, to be reflective, to think, what's the consequences of this if I say yes or if I say no? How much time do you give to the answering of questions that you're asked? Or to evaluating, why do I do what I do? Why did I treat that person that way? Why did I behave this way? How much time do you give? Why am I who I am? Beyond looking at what healing, what therapy would have you do, which is who hurt you and why. That nonsense. That is just the ego, the soul, the journey into the soul. Let's go to Teresa and her magnificent significance today. What I so loved about Teresa is that first, in my opinion, because all of these massive changes are happening, there's so much of me that is a historian. I don't know how many of you, but it's just, I'm associated now with it because everything for me is a historic reference. And there have been times always on Earth before, like World War II, or the industrial age, or other periods of time, when humanity has gone through great challenges and come out of it and renewed itself and kept going. But never before have those challenges been what they are now. Today, what is facing us is inclusive of every form of life on this planet. Not one form of life, from the air to the water to every species, to every nation, to every person, to every economic system, to every political system, to, not only that, every philosophical system and every theological system. There isn't one mythological system. There's a collision of the gods, and there's a collision of the ground. There isn't one blade of grass or one bumblebee that isn't threatened with survival. There isn't one person's bank account. No one escapes this time. No one. This time, we are all on equal footing. No one gets to say, but I have my money in a safe account. No one gets to say, but my neighborhood is safe. No one can hide behind their arrogance this time. This time, it's all or nothing. No one's religion will keep them safe in their silly mythologies. This time, we are all in it together. Either we all make it or we are gone. And I am not an Armageddon theologian. I have no use for that. I am a realist. I am not an optimist. I am not a pessimist. I simply call it the way it is. And it simply is this. This is what's true. What is also true about the nature of heaven, from what I can tell historically, is that the interaction of that side and this side is such that it tends to flood the earth with warning signs and with intervention before all hell breaks loose. It tends to call forward through having human beings feel like they don't fit into their skin anymore, so that they move forward. And as we end what is obvious, the fossil age, and move into the beginnings of the solar age, solar from the soul as well as solar, as we move into having to dismantle being creatures of five senses and having to, none of us live to see this new age. But we had a dress rehearsal for 50 years, a false new age, a new age that where we thought God was an option and we treated it like a hobby. This time, we have to go deeply into our soul with great humility and truly make the internal life of illumination a prayerful devotion, not for ourselves, but we truly need to understand that what we do for everyone else, and that a path of service may not necessarily be going out there and setting the world on fire so that we can show people who humiliated us how special we are. But that sometimes the greatest path of service is withdrawing for 30 minutes a day and praying for those who don't pray for themselves. Because you finally understand mystical law, and that what you do in that prayer is you clean up an atmosphere full of psychic free radicals that would otherwise route themselves into some really nasty decision-making energy for very dark forces out in this world. Mystics understood this. Teresa understood this in her own way. She totally understood it, as did John of the Cross. So when I look at her work, I look at someone who said there's 7 mansions, and I think 7 mansions, 7 chakras. And when I look at the last 40 years and how it's laid the template for us and said, we're very comfortable with 7 chakras. We're very comfortable with a map inside of us that says our energetic counterpart has 7 chakras. Going into the soul is one stage further. Teresa was this magnificent mystic. So let me just talk a little bit about her. She lived here. Of course, we have some wonderful guides that will be doing the history of Ávila for us and talking about Teresa, but let me just tell you from my point of view. She was a 16th century, she was a nun, Carmelite, 16th century mystic. She was a great mystical theologian. She, of course, lived here in Ávila. Her father put her in one of the convents that you're going to see when she was young because he thought she was getting too racy for her own good because she was very pretty. And he intended to haul her out at a later age, around 19, and then she would get married, but he never intended for her. She was from a Jewish background, and then they converted to Catholicism, largely to hide from the Inquisition. But he never intended that she would actually like being a nun. So it backfired. And but she just didn't want to be a nun. She wanted into the Carmelites, and which was a much more intense convent. So, and that you're going to see also their convent. So Teresa was a Carmelite, but as she, in her early years of being a Carmelite, it was not satisfactory for her. It was a life of devotion and a life of habit, but not a life of experience. And at age 39, she had what's called a conversion experience. There was a statue of, Catholics, especially Latino Catholics, have a way of emphasizing the bloody Jesus, you know, the bleeding Jesus on the cross. You're going to see a lot of that here. And they really got into the scourging. But she sees this statue that I believe was brought to the convent because of some high holy day or something. But she sees this, and the whole cosmic meaning of this suffering of the man, the teacher, the avatar Jesus, suddenly hit her. Instead of this nonsense myth that some god, an off-planet god, needed a human sacrifice, very Roman, in order to feel up in the sky, well, now I feel better. Instead, the cosmic archetypal meaning hit her, and she had a mystical awakening. And in that moment, the beginnings of the saint Teresa was awakened. The mystic was awakened. And that shifted her capacity to understand truth at a level. Now, I think for many people, you've had an experience like that in your own life. The moment that you have a realization about someone, I don't know if you've ever had this, but the moment you realize a truth about a human being, and it may not be a pleasant truth. I had an experience like that with someone when I realized they were actually a compulsive liar. And then everything that that person had said as I looked back finally made sense. Prior to that, I was always thinking, I was always making excuses as to why this didn't work out, or that didn't make out, or this didn't make sense, or this didn't work, or that didn't work. And then one day, like a sudden aha, I finally got that this gentleman was a compulsive liar. And as soon as I saw that archetypal pattern, everything lined up, and it was like an aha. And from the moment you see that truth about somebody, or that archetype in them, it's not even a person, it's like an archetypal awakening. It's the moment you see a pattern that's greater than them, and you get it. You get the mystery. It's that same type of thing, but in this case it was cosmic. Teresa's work serves as an entry into the soul, because what she saw so clearly was that the pathway in is a path of deep self-knowledge, getting to know yourself in relationship to your fear of the divine and the process of illumination. That the path into the soul was a path of understanding why you were afraid of truth. And that it starts out slowly through that path, which is the first 3 mansions, and that after you kind of get a comfort zone with that, she says, God comes for you. God comes for you. And that's the upper mansions, 4 through 7. And as you understand this deep interior journey, you come to recognize your intense fear of your own spiritual inner process, because you're so afraid that you'll lose your footing as a human being. That in fact it'll take you away from your 5 senses, so that you'll no longer be a sensual human being. That you'll no longer have a sexual appetite. That you'll no longer feel like you have a ordinary mortal life while having an extraordinary mystical life. And what you need to discover is that in fact both are heightened instead of both are numbed. But that's for you to discover, that in fact you become more fully a human being then less one. One is not sacrificed for the other, but as you come to know yourself, you'll realize how much you've actually sacrificed your humanity, your humanness, how much you've actually repressed yourself for fear of being fully who you are. And this is what you discover as you go into your mansion, that the fear of being humiliated has turned the volume down on your creativity. That in fact that has controlled you all of your life. And that fear has prevented you from hearing divine guidance. So your very fear of coming close to the divine is actually a fear of human beings and not God. She was on to this. So that this idea that your lack of being able to live fully is the result of past wounds is a joke. It's not. The route in is in your soul, not in your past. So that is where we're going in these days ahead, into this rich journey in your soul, one mansion at a time. First I will lecture on the mansion, then I will take you in experientially. It's a richly profound experience. And what I will encourage you on my part is that this is a small group, which is a real blessing. So I need to encourage you to get to know each other. There's so many of you that I know already, having been with you many, many times, so I happen to know you're wonderful, wonderful people. For those of you who don't know each other, get to know each other. And it's wonderful. In the second mansion, Teresa talks about soul companions, not soul mates, but soul companions. And what is true is that in the awakening of yourself, of your soul, you open yourself up for types of interior experiences that are quite profound. A fragile ego will want to run to someone else and talk. You don't want to talk to them. She says, if you do that, you're not ready. You're not ready. She talks about the profound need for silence and talking to others who know what you're talking about. But if you go and you talk to people who don't know what you're talking about, you set yourself up. You set yourself up for, one, the experience of feeling superior, and two, criticizing someone else because they don't know what you're talking about. Why would they know? And why should they know? And why should you get applauded because you've had an experience that they haven't? She would say, just for that, go back in the kitchen and peel potatoes. You're on KP duty, spiritual KP. So there's so much wisdom to learn from her. So you speak to those who know what you're talking about for your own sake. And this is what she means about you stay humble. Don't you dare put yourself in a position of superiority, because you'll get knocked down so fast. So there's so much to learn from her, as there is from her deep companion, John of the Cross. So now I'm going to turn over to Jim Finley to introduce John of the Cross, and then we will, at the end of this evening, open to a few questions from both of you. So, Jim?